This presentation discusses excavations as guided by Thompson excavation policies and OSHA 19-26.650. Here are some key terms dealing with excavations. First, an excavation is a man-made cut, cavity, trench, or depression formed by earth removal. A trench is a narrow excavation. Its depth is greater than the width, but not wider than 15 feet. A shield is a structure able to withstand a cave-in and protect employees within the structure. Shields can be permanent structures or can be designed to be portable and moved along as work progresses. They are known as trench boxes or trench shields. Shoring is a term that refers to structures such as metal, hydraulic, mechanical, or timber systems that supports the sides of an excavation and designed to prevent cave-ins. Sloping is a practice that protects employees from cave-ins by excavating to form sides that are inclined away from the excavation. The following concerns must be addressed by a competent person before beginning an excavation. First, evaluate soil conditions and select appropriate protective systems. Construct protective systems in accordance with the standard requirements. Pre-plan. Contact utilities to locate underground lines. Plan for traffic control if necessary. Determine proximity to structures that could affect choice of protective systems. Next, test for low oxygen, hazardous fumes, and toxic gases, especially when gasoline engine-driven equipment is running or the dirt has been contaminated by leaking lines or storage tanks. Ensure adequate ventilation or respiratory protection if necessary. Provide safe access into and out of the excavation. Provide appropriate protections if water accumulation is a problem. Inspect the site daily at the start of each shift, following a rainstorm, or after any other hazard-increasing event. Keep excavations open the minimum amount of time needed to complete operations. Surface crossings of trenches should not be made unless absolutely necessary. However, if necessary, they are only permitted under the following conditions. Vehicle crossings must be designed by and installed under the supervision of a registered professional engineer. Walkways or bridges must have a minimum clear width of 20 inches, be fitted with standard rails, and extend a minimum of 24 inches past the surface edge of the trench. When working in an excavation, it's important to have respect for the areas you are working in and have respect for the dirt itself. Remember, the average dirt or earth weighs 125 pounds per cubic foot. In other words, a cubic yard of dirt would weigh 3,375 pounds. It's very important you know the type of dirt you are working around. The most common three major groups are coarse-grained, sands and gravels, fine-grained, silts and clays, and highly organic soils referred to as peat. Coarse grain or gravels and sands are based on the grain size and the coarse-grained fraction. Fine grain, silts, clays, organic silts and clays are based on plasticity and organic content. One 2006 case involving two brothers in Maryland shows how important it is to plan when you work in an excavation. The brothers died when their trench caved in on them. 4 men had dug a trench 8 feet deep and 4 feet wide in front of a house. The bodies were recovered about 5 hours after they were buried. A relative said other workers tried to save one whose head was above the dirt. Experts stated that workers were taking shortcuts that jeopardized their safety. They figured it was not worth the time it takes to make the trench safe before you get in. While cave-ins do pose the greatest risk, other hazards include asphyxiation due to lack of oxygen, inhalation of toxic materials, fire, moving machinery near the edge of the excavation causing a collapse, and accidental severing of underground utility lines. Some common safe practices include sloping or benching the sides of the excavation. Support the sides of the excavation, or place a shield between the side of the excavation and the work area. These two visuals represent a good and a bad excavation. On the left, you can see the trench box placed in the center of the excavation, and the sides are sloped back to prevent cave-in. On the right, while the excavation walls are supported, its edges are not sloped back, which presents a high risk of cave-in. Both of these images represent dangerous practices. These workers are in a trench with no protective system, it is not sloped or benched, and has no means of egress. that is, no means of getting into and out of the excavation. Modern hydraulic jacks provide great protection from cave-ins. Using hydraulic jacks, an operator can easily drop the system into the hole. Once in place, hydraulic pressure is increased to keep the forms in place. Then, trench pins are installed in case of hydraulic failure. It is very important to have proper egress in an excavation. A proper and safe stairway, ladder, or ramp must be present in excavations that are 4 or more feet deep and within 25 feet of the employees. Any structural ramps you use in your operation must be designed by a competent person if they are used for employee access or egress, or by a competent person qualified in structural design if they are used for vehicles. Also, structural members used for ramps or runways must be uniform in thickness and joined in a manner to prevent tripping or displacement. These two ladders, which are lashed together, are not an adequate means of egress. The ladder should always extend 3 feet above the top of the excavation. Never lash ladders together in this manner. OSHA makes a distinction between temporary and permanent spoil. Temporary spoil must be placed no closer than 2 feet from the surface edge of the excavation, measured from the nearest base of the spoil to the cut. This distance should not be measured from the crown of the spoil. Spoil should also be placed so that it channels rainwater and other runoff water away from the excavation. Spoil should be placed so that it cannot accidentally run, slide, or fall back into the excavation. Permanent spoil should be placed at some distance from the excavation. Permanent spoil is often created where underpasses are built or utilities are buried. Remember, permanent spoil is spoil that is not intended on being placed back into the excavation. When working in an excavation, it is important to protect yourself from mobile equipment and vehicles. You can protect against mobile equipment and vehicles by installing barricades, by using hand and mechanical signals, by using stop logs, by grading soil away from excavations, and by fencing or barricading trenches that will be left overnight. Here are some tips you should remember at all times when working in and around excavations. Do not ever go into unsupported excavations. Prevent the sides and ends from collapsing by battering them to a safe angle or supporting them with timber, sheeting, or other support systems. No one can accurately predict if an excavation is safe to enter without a proper support structure. Remember that even work in a shallow trench can be dangerous. You may need to provide support if the work involves bending or kneeling in the trench. Never work ahead of a support. Do not store spoil or other materials close to the side of excavations. The spoil may fall into the excavation and the extra weight will make the sides more prone to collapse. Make sure the edges of the excavation are protected against falling materials. Wear a hard hat at all times when working in excavations. A worker does not have to be completely buried in soil to be seriously injured or killed. Workers who have been buried only up to their waist have died due to soil pressures exerted on their bodies. Excavations in or near backfilled or previously excavated ground are especially dangerous because the soil is loose and does not support itself well. Water always increases the possibility of a cave-in. The increased water pressure exerted on the soil can be the final factor in causing the walls to collapse. Clay can be extremely treacherous if dried by the sun. Large chunks of material can break off from a trench wall after having been stable and solid for a long period of time. At Thompson, we have a lot of experience in working in safe excavations. Each of these photos shows some form of a safe excavation. Keep in mind, excavations can be very dangerous to work in, but if you know the proper safety procedures, you can work safely in them every day.